Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So my presentation is on the effects of recreational drug use on the human skeleton, and this was done for skeletal pathology. So the main goal of this research is to investigate the effects of recreational drugs on the human skeleton. This study is a literature analysis data collected through PubMed and Wiley Library on the effects of drugs such as alcohol, opioids, cocaine, and cannabis on human bones. Results of the finding on the data collected are reported in the following analysis. So overview, I chose 4 recreational drugs we wanted to do. So alcohol, cocaine, opioids, and cannabis. So the methodology used in this research was we began with a broad search using PubMed on recreational drug use in human bones. From there, we refined our search based on which drugs were most commonly reported on. And then we formed a list, we gathered information on each drug and the effect they had on the human skeleton. So this is kind of the data collection process. So you can see exactly what we searched for, the number of results that were given, kind of how many papers we skimmed from that, and then the number of publications we actually pulled for the research. So the first one we'll be talking about is alcohol. And so alcohol affects the body every time one drinks, and it's especially crucial to young adults and pregnant women, and that's why there's kind of a legal age on drinking, and also why doctors advise pregnant women not to drink during their pregnancy. So in young adults, drinking is especially important because it causes the growing calcium supplies to be less mineralized in the bones. And so you might not think of it when you're 16, how much you're drinking, but it actually harms the bones a lot because it causes the calcium supplies to become really less mineralized. And you're not going to see the consequences of that until you're in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. And that's when osteoporosis comes and your bones become really brittle and weak. And that's why people break a lot of their hips or bones get broken really easily in their older ages. And in pregnant women, a study was done by JAMA Pediatrics, and it illustrated the numerous birth defects that come from when women drink alcohol during their pregnancy. And so you can kind of see in these illustrations, it causes a lot of problems in the facial development of a fetus. So they usually have smaller foreheads, lower bridges in their nose, an underdeveloped jaw, flat faces, and their nose bridge is a little different. And so you don't see it usually when you first meet the person, but usually doctors know when a woman was drinking during their pregnancy because it illustrates in the facial features of the child. And so a study done in 2011 through 2013 found that 1 in every 10 women report to drinking alcohol during their pregnancy within the past 30 days of a checkup, which is kind of terrible because they tell you not to do that, and it can cause even death in some cases for a fetus. So yeah, it's a bigger number than most people assume. So what kind of happens when a person drinks alcohol is there's an SDF1 protein that helps with bone growth, and alcohol actually weakens this protein and causes a low level of osteoblasts and significantly lower bone mineral density than the counterparts, especially in the growth of the neck. So you can kind of see in this illustration how a normal bone matrix should look. And then versus when you drink, the holes in the bones become a lot bigger, which is osteoporosis. And this causes brittle bones and them to be really weak, especially in your later years of life. So that was the kind of it on alcohol. So next topic is cocaine. And so cocaine has really bad effects on the body, as you can see from the illustration and the picture shown. Cocaine is usually snorted, and this causes deterioration in the back of the nasal cavity. And the cocaine actually dissolves your tissue first off, and then actually ends up destroying the bone in the upper mouth cavity and can cause mucosal lesions, just really bad stuff to happen. In one case, it actually completely destroyed this woman's nose. Graciela Blanco was someone that they studied for a while, and she reported to snort 2 grams of cocaine a day, which led to her nose bridge completely caving inward, her nose completely widened, and it just destroyed her nasal septum altogether. So that you can see from the scan, her just nose is completely gone. There's even some bone loss in the upper cheek area and also around the teeth. So that's it on cocaine. Next is opioids. Opioids are known to be really addictive substances, and they're usually prescribed by doctors. They cause really bad damage to the skeletal system, and they're only finding this out in recent years because of the vast overprescribing of opioids in the 21st century. As you can see kind of from this like illustration, it's not very specific, but in the 90s, opioids were prescribed at a lot less of a rate, and in the 21st century with big pharma and the pushing of prescriptions, a lot more people are addicted to opioid substances, and a lot of that means really bad damage on the bones. So researchers on PubMed conducted a comparison between young opioid dependent women and healthy young women to see the impact on the bone health. And they kind of wanted to make sure it was on young women because already in your older age, your bones will start to weaken and have some osteoporosis naturally from just age. So they wanted to make sure it was young adult women so the focus of the study could be more realistic. So they found that lower bone density was relative to opioid use in the women. So healthy women had normal bones with, there's going to be holes in the bones. It's not like a total compact bone, so that was normal. But they found that just really large, brittle, dry bones in the women who were addicted to opioid substances. So you can kind of see in the picture again, just the difference between a normal bone and bones with osteoporosis. Opioids can actually cause permanent damage as well due to its like sedative effect. In another study done, an overdose on sedative medications caused a permanent spinal cord injury. As you can see in the x-ray scan, her bone just kind of completely caved in completely. And so this happened again. A 56-year-old man received an injury on the C3 through C6 part of his spinal cord, and this was received again through sedation. So you might not think opioids have the effect on bones, but they really do, and they can cause bone weakening and damage and overall like paralysis in people. So that's it on opioids. Lastly is cannabis. Researchers have kind of been playing around with cannabis for a long time now, and to see if, instead of like the rest have been pretty damaging effects, and researchers kind of want to see if they can use CBD oil or CBD, which is the non-psychiatric, non-psychosis aspect of marijuana, to kind of actually help bones and help when there's fractures and stuff. So Yanko Gabbett and Ite Bob co-directed a study that evaluated the effect of CBD on fracture healing, and they actually found that participants that took CBD while they had a fracture, it healed faster. And you can kind of see in these graphs that the mineralized content in the bones was a little bit better in those who took CBD oil. And they also did it with THC, but they didn't see much of a difference. And THC is the actual like getting high part of marijuana, and that didn't really do much effect, but it's kind of the CBD. And now that's why they've started marketing CBD so easily in America. I'm sure you guys know they have like CBD oil, CBD this. So a lot of people have been using it for headaches and anxiety, but they're kind of seeing that they can actually help bone healing and strengthening of the bones. So our conclusion, overall, is found that drugs can have varying impacts on bones, but every drug does have an impact on the bones in the body. Opioids, alcohol, and cocaine had extremely deleterious effects, so they can cause damage to the body, while the effects of cannabis varied from neutral to positive. Yeah, this is our acknowledgements for thing, and that was the end. So does anybody have any questions or anything?
Samiyah, that was really interesting. You know, when you start talking about alcohol, it made me wonder, like, I guess, like, why alcohol is legal when it has such bad, like, effects, like, such awful, like, effects, but, like, weed is like illegal in so many states. Because I've
Yeah.
always wondered that, like, especially with the whole like legalizing marijuana debate, because like it makes no sense to me, like tobacco and like cigarettes are literally carcinogens and it's allowed and stuff like that, and like alcohol is like so bad for you, but it's legal, but like people lose their minds over weed, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it was
I have like
interesting to see that it was
ideas.
like, even when they did the studies, there was never any negative effects to the marijuana. It was always neutral, like no effect, or it was positive, which is so different from alcohol because they always tell you, like, when you're pregnant, nursing, don't drink, don't drink, don't drink, which is so completely different than how they treat marijuana. But yeah, I guess it is money, as someone said, like big pharma and all that control all the drugs in America.
Yeah, John, that's also true. Religious ceremonies, yeah.
Also, like, I don't know how accurate my AP US history is, but we were told like it was a lot to do with like African Americans used to use it a lot more than white people in like the beginning. So then they started making it illegal so that they could like arrest more and more Black people.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's how it started. Like that was the initial law basically, because it was like, oh, like they're forcing young white women to smoke weed so that they'll fall in love with them, blah blah blah. They're it was actual like written down, like he showed us documents and stuff too, so I think it's pretty accurate, but I don't know. So that's like the history for at least in America. I don't know about other places in the world.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at like the amount of people incarcerated like for marijuana, like really affects Black and Hispanic people over white people. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I know like a lot of people have gotten away with it, like at least where I live. But I
Yeah.
feel like in other places it's not like that, which is just kind of like weird, you know.
I mean, it's just wild that it's like legal in some states, people are profiting off of it, and then in other states, like people are in
No.
jail for their life. So
This reminds me of like, have you guys like seen all those cases of like forensic labs getting exposed and like judges and police chiefs being exposed for like planting marijuana and like fake evidence on people of color, specifically like Black men, to get them incarcerated and stuff like that? It's like really sad. Yeah, there's John's right. There's like a lot of racism that goes into it, but I also think it's interesting how like your article was talking about how like bad all this stuff is. But I remember if I don't know if you guys were here last week, but we talked about like or I mentioned Dr. Park's class about a history of cancer, because Zainab was mentioning like the blood-brain barrier and stuff. And her class is really interesting because specifically like about cigarettes and tobacco, like if you Google like 1980s, 60s, 50s like cigarette ads, it's crazy because they all come up saying that, oh, cigarette smoking is good for you, it'll help you clear your sinuses, like there's nothing wrong with it at all, like come on, like buy this product and stuff like that. And just seeing that is really crazy, because one way that they like were able to do that is because they had their own internal like department scientists who conducted research like showing everything that Samiyah is showing us today, like all the bad effects and stuff like that, but they kept that hidden for their own records. And instead they put out these fake science articles, and they hired legit doctors and scientists, paid them a lot to get them on board and say, oh no, this is actually good for you, like look at me, I'm a doctor, I'm telling you this is good for you, so that like there's no possible bad effect from that. So I just think that's really interesting, just comparing it, because that's not even like 50 years ago that happened, right? Like it's really recent. I mean, relatively recent. I guess not really recent, but
yeah, and with this stuff, like you're not going to see the effects of alcohol and opioids until you're like in your 60s, 70s, 80s.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
And so
This is just a
don't
fun
think about it.
fact. Oh wait, sorry.
No, you're fine.
This is just a fun fact. I think this is true, but didn't Coca-Cola start with having a little bit of cocaine in it in the very beginning?
More
Yeah.
than a
I
little bit.
swear I heard that when I went to the Coke factory.
Yeah, I did too. Everybody always says that.
That's so weird that cocaine was so widely accepted. I can't.
Yeah.
But anyways, I just think it's like just part of the conversation how some drugs are just so accepted at some points in time. Like smoking cigarettes was like cool and normal and like the thing to do literally 20 years ago. Like it was in every single ad just to promote doing something. And like now everyone's like, ew, cigarettes, why would you smoke that? But then they're like, yeah, smoking weed, like that's fine.
It's like the same with like Juuls and vapes now. It's like so
Yeah.
normalized, but you don't really know the effects of that. Like we don't know the long-term effects on health of that for like 60, 70 years.
I think the effects of that is going to be like people are just going to start realizing how bad it is for you, because like people put the most craziest things in Juuls and like
The craziest things, like
I don't know what to say. Like, they just put like anything. I don't know. I feel like you never really know.
Oh yeah.
What?
It's not good for your lungs at all. Like you never know like what's in it.
Yeah. But I mean, like, a lot of people have been coming out and saying like, oh, we've had to go to the hospital because of juuling, and like a lot of more stories and effects are coming out. So hopefully they can fix that soon. But I also think it's kind of weird how America focused so much on laws that affects like alcohol and drugs, where like that person is taking it for themselves and they're harming themselves, but like they don't focus on like gun laws or like laws that affect everyone in society. Like, I don't know, I was talking to one of my international friends and she mentioned that too. She was like, I don't know why in America they care so much if someone's like drinking, but they don't care if like someone has like guns and stuff like
I
that.
just feel like in America, people only care if it affects them. Like with the masks, it's supposed to protect other people, therefore they don't care about it. But like if it affects you, then suddenly people care.
Something that I wanted to bring up with the whole marijuana being like demonized, it's kind of interesting. Something most people don't think about is food that happened in like the food industry. Like a lot of a lot of meat processing companies tried to point out that fat, right? Like bacon fat was good for you. So for a while, bacon was actually considered like a legitimate portion of a healthy breakfast and not just like a horrible cholesterol source. And carbs were sort of thrown under the bus as like a demonized evil molecule that would kill you, when that wasn't scientifically true then, and it's not scientifically true now. Research was just covered up by bigger food companies.
Also, going back to John's point in the chat, he said that heroin was made to be a non-addicted version of cocaine. I guess this is like a not so fun fact. So the guy who invented like breast mastectomy surgeries, he was actually addicted to cocaine. His name's Dr. Halstead, and like he used cocaine just to stay awake all the time. And he actually he was a really smart person. Like he had all these innovative surgeries, like with gallbladder removal and stuff like that. And he I guess he did a lot of like innovations in like breast cancer surgery, but he was actually addicted to cocaine. Like he used it to stay awake and stay focused. And I guess it just is like a contrast from like the way that we view like people who do cocaine as like, oh, unproductive members of society. Like, you know, like just we view them really badly, but in reality they can be like anyone, like from any profession, I guess. Wow, the person who invented PCR was high on LSD. Honestly, that kind of makes sense, because how the hell do you think of that? Wait, I didn't know that. That's actually really funny.
And his visions were dying. Well, I'm glad both the Johns are very knowledgeable about this topic.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions or comments about this before we move on? Okay, thank you so much, Samiyah, for your presentation. And hopefully we'll post it on the blog soon and people can talk more about it there. And we'll move on to Swetha's presentation. So yeah.
Yeah, just give me one sec. I'm trying to figure out how to share my screen.
Oh. Let me make sure I made you a co-host. Okay, yeah.
Okay, wait. Does that work? Wait.
Yep, we can do it.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm like not good with this. Okay. I think I got it. Okay. That works, right? I think. Okay. Oh, I think you guys are frozen. Oh, wait, no, we're good. Okay. Sorry. My internet is really spotty, so yeah, if that breaks up, I'm sorry. But so for my presentation, I wanted to discuss the problem of chronic kidney disease in Central America, specifically amongst sugarcane workers. Oh, it's not letting me switch to the next slide. Oh, okay. So for some background to know, Central America has been like the world's largest producers of sugar ever since the Europeans colonized it, because it happens to grow really well in the environment and stuff. And if you know anything about the manufacturing of sugar and sugarcane is like an extremely stubborn plant. It does not like to be uprooted. It doesn't like to be messed with or anything. And it's even difficult to farm with proper machinery. So generally sugar mills favor like human labor over machinery in order to manufacture like more sugar and distribute it. So because it's such a physically straining process, it makes way for a lot of diseases to affect sugarcane workers, the main one being chronic kidney disease. So Mesoamerican nephropathy is a form of chronic kidney disease that scientists have seen is affecting a lot of sugarcane workers in Central America. And acute kidney injury leads to Mesoamerican nephropathy. So in this experiment, the purpose was basically to determine if there's a relationship between the job someone holds in a sugar mill and their like chances, or if they develop chronic kidney disease in the future. So for the study design, they basically performed a cross-sectional study of active sugarcane workers in Nicaragua, and then they did this for 12 months. So they did an observational study over 12 months and then followed up with the workers who developed acute kidney injuries. And so in the study, they used 326 male sugar workers who had normal levels of creatinine prior to the beginning of the study. So creatinine is basically the breakdown of creatine phosphate in the body, which is a result of protein metabolism. So any like physical activity you do or any like work on your muscles that you do will release creatinine. And creatinine levels increase with dehydration. And if you have abnormally high levels, it can lead to kidney failure, which causes like nausea, hypertension, and a lot of like different problems. And it's also really hard to like recover from. So for the study, they recruited sugarcane workers who had not developed chronic kidney disease despite like the exposure to it in the job. And one thing that kind of threw me off was in the study, the workers, the age group they used were male workers between 18 to 60 years old. And that kind of threw me off because that's a really large age group. And that meant like not all the workers were working the same amount of time in the field. So some workers might have like higher chances of developing CKD compared to like someone who just started like at 18 years old. But I think like the whole purpose of the study was just to find like if there was a relationship between what job people had in the sugar mill and their like whether they developed acute kidney injury. So we just have to like keep that in mind when evaluating the results. So this is a graphic from the study, and it basically like defines the baseline they use to define if someone had acute kidney injuries. So at the bottom next to the bandage, it explains that they had two baselines. So the first one was if an individual had creatinine levels that were a change in creatinine levels before and after that was greater than 0.3 milligrams per deciliter, they were told that they like labeled them as having an acute kidney injury. And then, or if they had creatinine levels overall that were greater than 1.3 milligrams per deciliter, they had AKI. So for some reference, normal creatinine levels for a healthy kidney is around, like for males, is 0.9 to 1.3 milligrams per deciliter, and then 0.6 to 1.1 for females. But they only studied males in this experiment, mainly because in sugar mills, since it's such like a physically hard work, mainly like it's done by males. So, and then for the results, they found that 34 of the 326 participants were diagnosed with acute kidney injuries. And they didn't report the mean for some reason, but I think it's pretty significant that they reported the median, because so the median creatinine level for those who had acute kidney injuries was 1.64 milligrams per deciliter. And like if we go back, the normal levels for a male is 0.9 to 1.3. So that is a lot off. And you have to take into account that that's the median. So there's a lot of outliers. There's a lot of people higher than that, and there's the amount of people lower than that. So I thought that was a really big deal. And then for workers who didn't have acute kidney injuries, they had a median of 0.88 milligrams per deciliter. And so with the 34 participants that had acute kidney injuries, they followed up on them a year later, and they found out a few things. First, they found out that there was a relationship between people who are working as cane cutters, so like physically cutting the sugar cane, and their development of acute kidney injuries. And they also discovered that newly developed decreased kidney function was pretty normal amongst like most workers. So like they saw generally like some kind of change between most individuals. And then out of those 34 people, half of them were diagnosed with chronic kidney disease just a year later, which is really crazy because that kind of disease affects you like in the long run too. And so they used linear regression to determine if there was an association between job category and kidney failure. And they resulted in a p-value that was less than 0.001. So what that basically means is if our null is saying that there's like not an association between the two, we have enough evidence to reject that and find evidence to support that there is some kind of association. And in this case, they found out that like people who were cane cutters had higher chances of getting kidney failure. And so this is just that was a pretty short study that I read, but I just wanted to add some additional information that I thought was really interesting. Why this study? So I'm in this honor seminar right now called like the Global History of Sugar, which is like very abstract, very strange topic, but it's really, really interesting. And so we read this article called Sugar Ain't That Sweet from the book Lucky Peach. And the author of the article basically wanted to go to the Caribbean and observe like working conditions, what workers were doing, what was the work like, and like sugar factories overall. So she goes to the sugar mill there and she found out that workers in the Caribbean get paid for how much they cut, not how long they work, which is kind of crazy to think about because they're literally developing like horrible diseases because their work is so physically exhausting, and they're only pushing their bodies to a greater limit by trying to cut more sugarcane because that's how they get paid. They have like no choice. And so she interviewed one of like the faculty at the factory in this area, and they were boasting like, oh yeah, only 1% of our employees are infected with chronic kidney disease, which is a pretty big deal since it's so prevalent amongst sugarcane workers. And turns out the statistics was pretty swayed because what these factories do is they'll hire workers because it's like it's a great, like there's a lot of people who need jobs in these areas. So they'll hire workers as subcontractors for just specifically for the harvest season. So these people will work every year just for the harvest season, and they're not considered employees, but they'll still develop these like kidney problems later on in life. So I thought that was really crazy. And then another thing that I thought was really interesting that I personally did not learn about this in school. I don't know if you guys did. But we learned about the U.S. Sugar Corporation, and on the right, I have like a little excerpt from the New York Times about it. But so in 1942, the FBI wanted to investigate the U.S. Sugar Corporation, which was like one of the largest like nationwide sugar factories. And it was based in South Florida, and they had heard like of some really unethical work practices among the corporation, so they wanted to like look into it. And so they found out that they were hiring like indigenous, I probably said that wrong, African Americans and immigrants and stuff to work for $1.80 a day in like horrible conditions. And they would promise them like higher wages later on if they worked now. And they wouldn't let these workers like leave at all. And I think it mentions in the articles here. So when workers would like try to escape, they would like shoot and kill them. Like workers would try to like escape on sugar trains that were trying to distribute sugar to different parts of the US, and they would literally shoot them. And it wasn't uncommon to like have people try and like catch workers who were trying to run away on highways and stuff, which I thought was really, really crazy because that's like 1942. That was like not that long ago, and I haven't heard anything about that, but it's literally like modern day slavery hidden within the sugar industry. So yeah, that's why I wanted to do this topic, because like this kind of stuff is happening like all over Central America, and it's still happening today. It's just we try not to hear about it, but it's important to educate ourselves about it because that's where we know where our products are coming from. So yeah, these are my sources. Questions?
I really enjoyed the presentation overall. Like I didn't know about this. I wrote this in the chat too, but I didn't know about this issue within the like the kidney disease within sugarcane workers, and even just how they're being treated in Central America. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's like so crazy. Like they just try to pretend that, like, especially the people who run these places just try to pretend like it's not happening at all, because like clearly like nothing has been done about it. And so what happens is a lot of like these poor families usually get into sugar farming and these types of jobs because it's easily accessible to them because the industry is so large. Like we always need sugar, you know, there's a like consistent demand for it. So what happens is like in a family of four, like the father might start working at the sugar mill, and then he develops some type of kidney disease and he can't work anymore. So then the mother takes over, and then like the children take over after that. So it's like an endless cycle of the labor being passed down through generations. So
Yeah, I had a similar topic in my economics class. It was just at the very end, so I don't know the specifics about it, but basically in Pakistan, like this really big soccer company, it makes soccer balls and footballs. They had children like hand sew soccer balls and stuff, and then they actually removed people found out, and the whole industry got moved to China, where the balls are now made in factories instead of being hand sewed. And they went back and did a study of that area of Pakistan, and all the people there either became like prostitutes or thieves. And it was just really, really sad. But I had a conversation with my brother about it, and I was like, what's the worst of the two evils, you know? But then my brother was like, he was like, you can't continue child slavery. Like you have to replace it with something. They should like, people should have advocated for it being replaced with like an education system, or implementing an education system while working. And I think sometimes with our culture, it's kind of like fake wokeness. Like people think they're doing what's best, but they've never been to a third world country, or they've never really like understood like that culture, or like what's going on over there.
yeah.
So like they're advocating for something they think is right, but it might end up hurting like in the long run. You have to really look at what you're wanting these like big corporations to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the whole like ignorance is bliss thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like we think we're doing the right thing, but really we're just more uneducated. That's how I felt like learning about all this stuff. I was just like, wow, like I go to the grocery store and like I'm not thinking about where my products come from. I'm just thinking of like what I'm getting, you know? And so it's so crazy to think about like that distinction between the countries, like where all of this stuff is made up of, versus like our country, which is a little more like well off in comparison, and like how the lifestyle is so different, because they're probably like worrying about where this comes from or growing it themselves, but we're here just like, we are definitely privileged to be able to like go to a grocery store without thinking about that.
I think something else to be talked about with that topic is like, it's kind of silly, but reparations for corporations when they are called out on things like this aren't actually repairing the damage that is caused by the corporation installing itself as a power. It's like the basic human decency of like the corporation stops enslaving kids, and then people like praise corporations. They're like, what an amazing forward moving step this corporation has taken, where it no longer enslaves kids for labor. But the corporations aren't required to go back and provide education or repair the landscape that they've destroyed because it's no longer farmable, like the soil isn't agrarian anymore. Corporations can just leave, essentially. And I think that's a big problem with like how people view corporations, because corporations have the same legal rights as people. I think they should have the same legal failings as people too. If you went and enslaved someone's child, you would not be required to unenslave their child. You would be required to pay reparations for enslaving their child. We should hold corporations to those same standards. If you go and enslave a third world country, you have to go and help the third world country once you're called out on it.
Yeah, and it's such a low standard too. Like, why would you praise a corporation for like stopping like child labor, you know? Like, I mean, like that's what they're supposed to, like they shouldn't have done that in the first place, kind of thing, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, no, you make like such a good point with that.
I mean, even in America, this is like, I think you should always tip, right? Because restaurants normally don't pay their waiters enough. But the practice of tipping came about in the Great Depression because restaurants couldn't afford to pay their waiters enough. So they encouraged rich patrons to come in and tip the waiters so that the waiters could continue to work and make a reasonable living. After the Great Depression, corporations realized that they could increase their profit margins by still refusing to pay their workers a decent wage and just expecting other people to tip. So the practice of tipping was carried on by restaurant companies so that they didn't have to pay their workers a minimum wage that was livable. And you could just expect people to tip the workers now.
That's so crazy. I've literally never heard about that either. Like, and that's awful too, because like, especially nowadays, like these corporations have the money to pay their waiters like a good wage, but they just choose not to because they're greedy and they want to hoard all their wealth.
It comes down to the bottom. In accounting, you learn there's like a formula for finding out the value of a person to a corporation. And like, if you're a line worker, you're worth something along the lines of like $3.80 as far as Amazon's bottom line goes. Like, that is the value of your workers' comp and stuff. So if your workers' comp is more than $3.80, they will rather fight a legal battle, right, to deny you workers' comp than just provide you basic rights.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I kind of think it just goes back to like under a capitalist system, right? Like everyone who has any form of power in whatever country it is, like anyone who's like well off or rich or anything, like they're never gonna want to like support anyone who like goes against that, like maintaining that power structure. Like kind of like what Rabbi was saying and kind of what Hassan you're saying now. Like I remember a couple of years ago when the World Cup happened and those soccer companies, Adidas, were all using like women in Pakistan, like those factories to make those soccer balls. I remember there were so many articles like, oh my God, Adidas, it's helping these women in third world countries. Like, and like the media and these companies, it all goes hand in hand. Cause like even companies now, like I'm sure all of us know H&M, they have their shop conscious or whatever, like where it's like help the environment, like upcycle, donate your clothes here and you'll get 1% off. And they like have given themselves this environmentally friendly image, which is so not consistent with how H&M actually operates, right? Because like the majority of their clothes are made by like poor Bengali like women and kids who are like kind of coerced into these sweatshops just to make a living, right? And now H&M has like the luxury of rebranding itself as being like, oh, we want to help the environment and stuff like that, especially when they've had so many factories like burned to the ground with people actually like dying inside of them, and they haven't addressed that, they haven't done anything to fix that. And yet like I don't know, there's just so many examples of that, like where labor's outsourced to, and even in America, so many American companies, they go overseas, get their labor there. I don't know, it's just really messed up. And kind of like Swetha, what you were saying about like how when we go to the grocery store, we don't think about like where those products came from, like overseas. But honestly, even American farms today, like so much of the labor, like who's picking the vegetables, it's undocumented immigrants, right, who are barely paid anything because like the farmers, the corporations, whatever, they all know that they can get away with paying these undocumented like people less than like minimum wage, right? And those undocumented people, they have no choice but to take that because like what's the alternative? Like escape like the oppression that they were trying to get away from, or like risk not being hired or being outed by like another company if they were to go that route. I don't know, there's just a lot that goes into it.
Something I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I would like to say, like people always say that it is it is because we live in a capitalist society that these events occur. Capitalism itself doesn't inherently promote the accumulation of wealth. Capitalism in like a perfect capitalist system, right? The concept is that no one should accumulate enough wealth to have the power to influence the market. So quite literally, the value of the dollar is the only effect on the market, and corporations and consumers should stand on a relatively even playing field where corporations have to provide consumers with products they'll consume at an equivalent rate. But in our society, there is a huge accumulation of wealth that can occur generationally or through corporate power, which then breaks the capitalist system by giving corporations much more control over the market than individuals. And when corporations gain that control over the market, that's when individuals sort of have to submit to what corporations say. Because like something else that I hate is the branding and like price upscaling on products that are organically sourced or ethically sourced. When an ethical source for a product shouldn't require you to pay more for the product, it should be required for companies to ethically source their products because they can still make a profit while ethically sourcing products within a capitalist system, again, because the only thing a profit represents in a capitalist system is money that will then be put back into the system to continue the cycle of capitalism. It's when corporations require this hoarding of wealth to accumulate power within our society that the capitalist system breaks down. And, that's when you get into problems with like monopolies and people abusing power.
I don't know, for me personally, I just view it as like this is like an effect of capitalism, at least in my opinion, because like I remember like Karl Marx's like big thing was like the proletariat, obviously like the working class, it needs to rise up and challenge these systems. But a big reason that these systems are even in place is because capitalism like gives them the power to do that. And Karl Marx, like one thing I really like that he said was that like a lot of the working class, so I'm pretty sure that would be all of us, I'm sure none of us are like these ultra rich 1%, right? A lot of us have like this false class consciousness. We either underestimate our position in society, that we aren't valued, like we have the potential, American dream, like, you know, I can rise up, I can become a millionaire too. So don't hate on millionaires. Like millionaires aren't that bad. Like how dare you say that and stuff like that. So like that false class consciousness, it prevents us from really like banding together, starting these unions, like holding these people accountable. And honestly, like I agree with like a lot of what you said, but I just think in like this, away from the theoretical of what capitalism should be versus what it is, like the social factors right now surrounding capitalism, I feel like that's something that honestly, like I feel like not a lot of Americans like really talk about it as much, because those impacts are in all of our lives. We're all going to be affected by it, right? Like even if you think about this upcoming presidential election, how people were so like mad that Bernie wanted to tax the 1%. His tax plan wasn't even that crazy. It was just, you know, maybe we should tax them a little more than just 1% of their billions of dollars of wealth, right? Because think about how much a little bit of that could solve so many of our social issues, right? Just about like how our budget is split up, how we allocate like resources to education and stuff like that. I don't know. I think you're right that the theoretical versus what it is right now, there's a big discrepancy. But I think taking into account the social factors and just like really holding like the culture that made it possible accountable is really important.
Wait, see, with that, how would you achieve perfect? Like when you say Karl Marx, you're discussing theoretical communism. Like when communism has been applied in similar social structures, you see that the powerful class once again rises up, gains government positions, and once they take over that central ruling body that is supposed to be evenly allocating wealth allocation is monopolized to that high. Yeah, like theoretical communism also fails, or applied communism also fails. In theory, these economic systems work. When you add in like social factors, I don't think they hold up that well.
Okay, we can continue this conversation on our blog. Wait, but I think
you're like we can continue to destroy capitalism on our blog.
Yeah, because I don't want to get too into the weeds with it. But I think those are really good points, and I think that's something that what Shabazz is saying in the chat. I think it's valid that like it automatically gets shut down. I think that I guess America just in our education system and stuff, we just have to be more aware of like different systems. I'm not saying that one system is perfect or one system is bad. I just think that every system has its pros and cons, and just like one thing that we as Americans don't do is we don't recognize the con, right? Like we don't recognize the problems as much on a wide scale, like not like attacking individuals or anything. But I don't know, I think those conversations are important to have. Hassan and me can probably collab on a blog post about it. But Swetha, you did a really good presentation. Does anyone else have any other comments they want to share before we move on to Drew? Okay, well, Drew, whenever you're ready, you can share your screen and then we can get into it.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sweet. Let's see if I can figure this out. All right. All right, so I decided to do mine on the immunopathogenesis of good old corona. Yeah, so you guys kind of know the deal. I think at the time that I made this, there's 13 million cases worldwide and 3.5 million in the US. So corona is a RNA virus. The mutation rates in those viruses are greater than those of DNA viruses, and there are actually 39 species that belong to the family Coronaviridae, I think that's how you say it. And over at this chart, you can kind of see the situation that we're in, and that's the rate of new infections. And you can kind of see where everything started going down, and then everything started opening up.
Thank you for calling Student Blue. If you have a question about a waiver or enrollment, press 1. All other callers remain on the line for the next available service professional.
I don't know what that was, but so a lot, it gets compared to the flu a lot. So the flu actually involves a neuraminidase surface protein. I think that's how you say it, which causes mucus to peel off or desquamate. So all coronaviruses lack this ability, and COVID is no exception to that. On the other hand, COVID utilizes ACE2, which is angiotensin converting enzyme 2, of the victim cell, and that's shared with SARS. I don't think it's shared with the Middle East, like the MERS, I think that's what it is. But COVID is so dangerous because it attacks the lower part of your lungs and the alveoli and the bronchioles. And there's a lack of immune memory cells here, which can actually, in other coronaviruses, it kind of halts the infection early, but with COVID, that doesn't really happen though. So the problem that my study addressed was that, as you know, most of the cases are actually mild, like 85% experience mild symptoms, 10% are severe, and 5% are critical. And of course, you guys know that the majority of these critical cases are the elderly and debilitated individuals. But the other immunodeficient group, which is children, are not really affected by this, and they only have mild symptoms, and like most of the time you don't even know that they're infected, which doesn't really make sense because children should be susceptible for a few reasons, because they have a developing immune system, they have far less memory cells, and they have a shorter bronchial tree, which means a shorter distance for the virus to travel. So that leads into the cytokine storm. So the main way COVID causes all this damage is not because it infects, or it does it itself, it's the immune response. So, and COVID doesn't lyse cells, so it doesn't split them open like other viruses do. So the main culprit here is the cytokines, which induce inflammation, and upon detection of COVID, the body sends tons and tons of these into the bottom of the lungs, and like the alveoli are the point where oxygen travels into the blood. Like that whole process goes on, like goes. So of course the body's going to be more sensitive in this area. So that can cause lung tissue damage. It decreases oxygen level and can cause severe pneumonia. And I had to include this meme because, I'm sure if you could ask COVID or the cytokines or cytokines, they both point to each other and blame each other for all this damage. But yeah. So the main like the answer to this problem is actually memory cells, because memory cells do record as you age, it records certain responses to coronaviruses. And actually you encounter, like the average human encounters a ton of these viruses, but none of them can really do anything because this memory cell system kind of curbs the infection early. But COVID possesses this antigen, this S antigen, on these little spikes of the virus, and I think they're the red ones on the little spikes in my picture here. But in these elderly and debilitated patients, it causes this unregulated, exaggerated immune response, because they do not possess the like a healthy immune system that healthy adults have, and can't regulate their immune response and can't control it. So that ends up doing all that damage to the lungs. And the study that I read over hypothesized that it's this lack of memory cells in children that kind of saved them from the severe symptoms of the virus. and that causes a much milder mediated response to them and doesn't really subject them to the all that bad stuff that other respiratory viruses cause them, because children are they get the flu a lot. They're more susceptible to that. So a possible solution to this, to the more severe symptoms, would be helping the immune system mediate the response to tissue repair, and that would involve T helper 2 cells. And they usually respond to inflamed areas, but you need to increase that because of the exaggerated response. But I think that's it. Any questions?
Hey Drew, I had a question about the ACE2 activity. I know ACE2 like helps increase blood pressure. So like does the virus increase its activity because like the increased blood flow would like damage the lungs? Like is that kind of like why it does that?
I don't think the study really touches on that. I just know that it's understood that it uses that receptor protein. I don't know. I'm probably gonna have to look into that. I don't really know. Any others?
Shabazz or Mohammed Khan asked something in the chat. If someone had one type of corona like SARS or something in the past, would they have a quicker immune response to the COVID virus right now?
Quicker? I don't think so. Like the body, because of that S antigen, I think the body just kind of doesn't even recognize that as a coronavirus, because part of that exaggerated immune response is that like the body thinks it's a different kind of virus actually. But because I think in the article it said that people that actually had SARS, like they don't have any protection against COVID or any quicker response to it. So
also, do you know if immunosuppressants could be like used, I don't know, in controlled doses perhaps to like limit the severity of the COVID immune response?
So there's actually a ton of research going on right now. So I'm actually immunocompromised a little bit. I'm taking drugs that kind of suppress my immune system, and there's actually research going on that might say that people immunocompromised people might have an advantage because of that if they're elderly or debilitated in some other way, because that might weaken the immune response and stop all that and inflammation and blockage and stuff like that. But yeah, hopefully we can all go back or not go back depending on your situation. It's still a question I have, how they're going to handle all that in the fall.
Are you an NC State student?
Mm-hmm.
Have you looked at some of Randy Woodson's like emails where he has the little town halls? Yeah.
Some of it's kind of sketchy, like how they're gonna do fountain. Ooh, I don't know.
What have they said about it? I haven't went to any of the town halls.
So the way they're doing fountain, like they're setting up a ton of glass barriers, and I think the way they're doing fountain is that they're having you go through one line at a time, and I don't know if you can go back, so got to make up your mind early.
Wait, I lived in Lee, so I lived right next to Fountain, and I would go a lot, and like it's like pretty chaotic to do one line because they designed it so that there could be two lines so that things would go faster. So one section and the other section has literally the same exact food.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, that's just kind of like something to consider, I guess, because then what are they going to do with the whole other section? Like, is it just going to be empty or something?
Yeah, I don't know. They're still planning it all out, I guess.
Are you a freshman or have you like been to Fountain before?
Oh, I'm a rising senior.
Okay, so So, wait, so do you think like other things will be affected too that you're accustomed to at state already?
I mean, probably. I bet Tally's gonna be a petri dish. You know, I mean, they're still planning it all out, and I'm still deciding if like a gap semester and all that, like a relaxed semester is a good thing to do. And
Have you guys
yeah.
sort of tying in the last presentation from Swetha? Did you see that they're gonna start stocking like hand sanitizer and masks and vending machines to themselves,
Yeah, I
students,
saw
if
that.
you need it?
Yeah, that's weird. I saw that they purchased like 1 million masks, like the whole
Yeah.
campus purchased.
When they first said they were like going to provide sanitation stuff, I was like, oh, I thought they were just gonna give out sanitation, but no. At least in the latest email from what I read, there's gonna be like vending machines with you can use all campus dollars to buy masks or sanitation or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but yeah, it's a weird. Yeah, yeah, I saw them in the vending machines and stuff, and I saw that they're gonna like wipe down something every 15 minutes, like the C-stores or door handles, and they have people employed to like specifically do that, which is pretty interesting.
I wonder if people are even gonna wear their masks. Because I know for me in my town, like whenever I go grocery shopping, like a ton of people and their kids are not even wearing masks. So I wonder how that'll go. Because like realistically, how can they like enforce that, right? Because like I know people are gonna still be like hanging out like normal. Because so many people I know aren't even like distancing anymore. Everybody's acting like it's completely normal. But honestly, like I was watching CNN last night. And I've been so focused on how colleges are handling it, I completely forgot about like middle school, elementary schools, how they're going to handle it. So I know it's a really hot debate right now with Betsy DeVos because she's like skirting around a lot of questions. I honestly, you guys should really check it out. It's really interesting. Or I guess like really sad to see her response because like she literally yesterday, the CNN anchor, she was like, so do you agree with the CDC's like measures? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, yes or no, do you agree? And she gave a 5-10 minute long ass response, not even answering the question. I'm scared for these kids. Like, at least we'll be on college. Most of our classes are online. But like a lot of like middle schools, elementary schools don't even have that option. Like, imagine coming from like a less well-off like tax district, like and like a less well-funded school. Like it's actually really scary. I really feel bad for the kids. I really hope they don't open school for them.
Yeah.
There's also sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I bet we'll be on campus for like a month, or not probably at maximum a month, probably 2 weeks, because that's how long the symptoms start to show. I think they're just gonna send us all home again, honestly. But yeah, I agree that like elementary schools and high schools and middle schools, they're all in big trouble because
yeah,
I mean I know mine was kind of iffy on that.
Wait, you live close enough to state that you could commute from
I
home?
live an hour and a half, so yeah, I mean not really commute like that, but I live off campus though, so
Okay. I think it's really difficult for freshmen too, because I remember like I'm a rising sophomore, so last year like when like freshman year I feel like you finally understand everything. Like my first semester I did not know anything. I didn't go to any office hours. I didn't really get involved in clubs or anything, and that's kind of when I learned about like everything about NC State and like what I'm interested in, what I want to get involved in, and like what professors like is it beneficial to go to office hours? What professors should I go to office hours for? I think like what professor and like how to build relationships with professors. I think that's really important for freshmen because then by your sophomore year you can like at least try to get some sort of position or do something, and you need good connections with professors because almost everything requires at least one letter of rec from like a professor or something. So I think that's going to be really hard for freshmen coming in because if everything's online, then it's really hard to build relationships with them. And also I like contacted a lot of my class, like people like running the classes or like the biology advisors and stuff like that. And they said that at least for bio 240 and 245 that it's going to be hybrid, but they have to do a completely online version too, just for anyone who can't come in. So I think that might apply to a lot of different classes where like it might be considered hybrid or in person, but they have to record the lectures and put them online so people can do online schooling, because I feel like it's unfair, especially to people who are immunocompromised or have family members that are, to force them to come in person for a class, but like none of the other facilities are open. So I feel like, I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think they should give us the choice on that, because it still is like, despite all that protection that they're putting on, like it's still like a big risk.
Yeah,
just how
I just hope
campuses
everyone
are.
I really hope people wear masks. Like I feel like people who say that, oh, I can't wear a mask, or it really like it's like an infringement of my rights, I think like they're not really considering the effects for everyone else. Like I think wearing a mask is the least someone can do to keep themselves and other people safe during COVID. Like if you look at healthcare workers or people that have actually been affected by COVID, like their lives are so much harder, and they're risking their lives just to get everything back to normal. And even people like epidemiology and stuff. So I think like people, like the society in general, needs to take a step back and like think like, am I doing this for myself, or am I doing it for everyone around me, But I'm working with people who want to go into like epidemiology and other like biotechnology careers. They said that the one, like, not really, I guess, positive, but like positive from that is like a lot of those careers were not in high demand, and there was not a lot of like career options left for people like that, because like their fundings were being cut. But now due to COVID, like those career options are open again, so people with like biology majors or biotech majors can get jobs a lot easier than you could like 2 or 3 years ago. So I don't know, I just thought that was cool to mention.
Yeah, I guess for me, my only like thought now about everything is just that I just wish we had a more centralized like response from the government, because like I think Trump just recently put a mask on, and even Betsy Davis, like so many different members of the government are saying such different things, right? Because like the NIH is fully funded by the government, and like you're hearing one thing from like Dr. Fauci, I think I'm saying that wrong, but like he's saying one thing, the CDC is also funded by the government saying one thing, and then like all of our government officials are acting one way, and then even us like locally, like how NC State's responded, how UNC's responded, Duke, like everything's just been all over the place. And I know like I guess this is a criticism of myself as well, because I'm always like, oh, people should wear masks, but honestly, like if I was like not in science and I'm seeing all of this like fragmentation of like response and stuff like that, I genuinely I don't know if I like how I would feel about it, right? Because like we're seeing such a mixed response. So I don't know, I guess like we should just hope that the people we put in power do better by us. I guess that's my like last thought about it. I don't know.
I agree. All right, well, here are my references, the 2 that are there, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Drew. You did a really good job. Guys,
you.
tune in next week. I think Homa was supposed to present this week, but she had a timing issue with work. So we'll definitely hear everything she has to say next week. It'll be super interesting. And we'll also be just announcing our plans for the fall in the next few weeks as well. So make sure you guys come to our meetings next week. Thank you, guys.